cherries have created moments. 5 hexagonal segments of sensual milk chocolate delight. Savor the velvety smooth caramel. Luxuriate in each delicious hazelnut. Well, either that or wolf the whole lot down in one go.
Sometimes our thought and care seem completely wasted on you.
Hello, Angela. You look very nice.
One has been asked to do a Nescafe commercial.
Have you? Why?
Because one has taste, that's why. Some people have good taste, and some people don't.
But I drink Nescafe.
Yes, but you don't appreciate the rich aroma.
No, but I love the smell. Are these the special beans?
Please don't touch those.
Oh, go on. One shake is all one wants.
Really?
Nescafe. Coffee at its best.
Cats are great. They always want to help. Right now, their help is all I need. Uh-oh, what's Tom getting up to? I know. Given a choice like this, Whiskers!
Most cats would prefer whiskers.
As you can see, we all rely on Whiskers.
Whiskers, the most preferred cat food.
You make me feel so young. You make me feel so spring has sprung. And every time I see you grin, I'm such a happy individual. You make me feel so young. You make me feel there are songs to be sung, bells to be rung, and a wonderful fling to be flung. So young.
Excuse me, you two. I think I'm just going to go and kill myself.
Cheerful chappie, isn't he? One minute he's giving out the orders, the next he's after a little sympathy.
Not now, I'm busy.
What? We'll have a think about it.
I'm sorry, Mum. I'm afraid it's bad news.
Well, I think I'll have to get a second opinion.
Trouble in Mind. Sunday comedy on Central.
Central Lobby investigates how politicians' decisions affect our daily lives. That's later at 10:45 after the news.
Thousands of Kuwaiti hostages freed by Iraq. Tornado pilot Peters' home, British pullout starts this weekend. Judge returns 10 Rochdale children to their families, running onto the rocks in desperation to flee Albania. And cruelty to animals rises alarmingly. Good evening. Thousands of Kuwaiti prisoners held by Iraq are back home tonight. They were released earlier this evening. They streamed across the border, packed into lorries. They were cheering and waving. They'd been taken by Iraq by retreating Iraqi troops. Some had been there since the invasion 7 months ago. The Red Cross is supervising the transfer. Earlier it said Iraq would also release a group of around 20 missing Western journalists. So far, the Iraqis haven't. It's not known if the group was to have included ITN's reporter Andrew Simmons, cameraman Sam Gracie and producer Michael Gillings. James Furlong at ITN reports.
Out of the darkness of the Basra highway, the first pinpoints of light signalling the convoy's arrival. At its front, a Red Cross vehicle and its American military escort. And then the first of 17 trucks reached the Allied-held base at Safwan. Their occupants, seemingly packed into every available inch of space, cheered and waved as they passed through the lights of waiting television cameras. The truck, its windscreen missing, its passengers leaning over the bonnet to wave to reporters and troops by the roadside. The trucks driven by Iraqi soldiers, the mood of their occupants jubilantly anti-Iraqi. And others who stopped, desperate to tell of the hardships they suffered while being held by the Iraqis.
They treat very badly. There is no bathrooms. There is no food. And also they give us only one bread. It's very dirty, and we found some insects like flies inside the bread. and there is no water. The water, they take it from the ground, from the raining. This is the bread, and this is the only one day. And there is almost 5 people in this one bread.
They took me from the shopping. I was shopping with my friend. Okay, and they took me to teen agents, crime teen agents. You know teen agents there in Ferdos, a place for teen agents, prison. For 3 days we were sleeping on the floor without any blankets, without anything, even water.
No word on the whereabouts of the missing Western journalists.
So have you or the Red Cross any knowledge about the journalists now?
Not now. No.
Any prospect of
Well, in any case, I here have none.
Then the convoy was moving again, carrying its passengers back to Kuwait City, but a city which many would now barely recognize as their own.
ITN's Ken Rees is in southern Iraq, and he joins us there. Ken, did the returning refugees give you any idea at all about the conditions in Basra?
Very little information, as you will have seen. The scene was very confused. They were very jubilant. They were much more interested, frankly, in telling us about the terrible conditions that they've been kept under. They had very little food and water, were just overjoyed to be home, Trevor.
The next batch of Kuwaitis to come across the border.
So I missed that. Can you say again,
When
please?
are you expecting the next lot of Kuwaitis to come across the border now?
Well, that's the problem, Trevor. I spoke just recently to the Red Cross here. Clearly something went wrong today because they were expecting to get to Basra. They were expecting, it has to be said, to bring back the British and other journalists. This didn't happen. I asked them when they were expecting more people to come across. They said they knew no more details. As to conditions in Basra, just a few minutes ago from here, we saw the trucks and the buses going back up the road towards Basra again. They were being driven, some of them, by members of the Republican Guard. I think that perhaps tells you a little about what the situation may be in Basra.
Ken Rees, thank you very much indeed. Iraqi opposition groups claim today that rebels are still in control of 9 Iraqi towns. That's despite attempts by troops loyal to President Saddam Hussein to drive them out. The Islamic Dawah Party said the rebellion was a rebellion of all factions of the Iraqi people, Arabs, Kurds, Turks, Shiites and Sunnis. Our diplomatic editor, Edward Sturton, is tonight in the Jordanian capital, Amman. Like all other foreign correspondents, he was ordered to leave Baghdad. Ed, what did the Iraqis make of the conditions around them now? What is happening in the country now?
I think people have been very frightened by the sort of thing that's been going on in Basra. A number said to us before we left, we are worried there's going to be a civil war here. That's not so much a pro or anti-Saddam comment. It's more a reflection on the, if you like, the religious sectarian tinge to the events in Basra. The fact that it's a Shiite-led movement. And I think what people are worried about is that if there is instability here, that the friction between Iraq's various communities might break into conflict, that Iraq might really become another Lebanon, if you like.
Were you able to make any judgment at all about the level of dissent in the country?
In Baghdad, it's very different to Basra, I think, partly because the government there is still very much in control. There's no sign of any uprising on the streets, or certainly none that we could judge, although, as you know, we operated under some restrictions. At the level of people talking to you privately, if you could get them to one side, or even of just coming up and whispering to you in the street for 10 or 15 or 20 seconds, that we detected even before the land war began, and that has been growing. But in terms of open demonstrations on the streets of Baghdad, nothing that we could see anyway.
Edward Sturton in Jordan, thank you very much. Julia?
British servicemen and women in the Gulf are starting to come home this weekend. The Prime Minister, Mr. Major, told the Commons that medical reservists would be first back. The first RAF Tornado crews would be on their way in a few days, and the 7th Armoured Brigade, the Desert Rats, would begin to leave the Gulf early next week. Flight Lieutenant John Peters, the Tornado pilot captured by the Iraqis and freed on Monday, returned to his squadron and his family this evening.
It was a restrained and dignified welcome for the first hero home from the war. Flight Lieutenant John Peters looked relaxed and confident as he acknowledged the good wishes of his commanding officers. He's shaved the beard he'd grown in the 7 weeks as a prisoner of the Iraqis. The terrible bruising the world saw on Iraqi television has faded.
Just a bit.
John, turn a second. John, inside. Give us another word, John.
He was clearly simply glad to be home. then off to be reunited with his family and a joke with a friend. To the satisfaction of photographers, 40 minutes later, Flight Lieutenant Peters and his family cuddled cheerfully. Everyone here has been further cheered by the news announced by the Prime Minister that most of the Tornado pilots remaining in the Gulf will be returning in the next few days, and all the troops will be home as soon as possible. Tonight, Flight Lieutenant and Helen Peters at last went home together. For Flight Lieutenant Peters and his family, it's now a time for quiet celebration. For nobody here forgets that 5 British airmen are still missing, 3 of them from this base. Sarah Cullen, News at 10, Larbrook.
American troops, more than 500,000 of them, will be going home from the Gulf at a rate of about 5,000 a day from now on. Flying the other way today was the American Secretary of State, James Baker, to explore what he and the White House called a new chance, a new opportunity for broad Middle East peace talks.
For a small boy, a long wait ended with a long run to the father he hadn't seen in 7 months. This was Florida, but all over America, hundreds of families are reunited. Some soldiers weren't expected. Clayton Carpenter's parents were told he'd been killed by a landmine.
When they called my mom, and she hadn't been notified yet that I was still alive, and she wouldn't believe it was me.
For some, the first chance to see the children born while they were at war. For others, a chance to catch up on lost affection.
Give me a kiss, come on.
And for the wounded, honours. The largest troop deployment in half a century is winding down. In Congress, all shared in lavish praise and emotion as the President recalled a moment of Iraqi surrender.
And then there was an American soldier. Remember what he said? He said, "It's okay. You're all right now." That scene says a lot about America, a lot about who we are. Americans are a caring people.
Just under half this Congress voted against the war, a war the President said mustn't happen again. Iraq must be denied weapons, Arab states should recognize Israel, Israel should give land for peace.
Anything else would fail the twin tests of fairness and security. The time has come to put an end to Arab-Israeli conflict.
To press the case, Secretary of State James Baker left for the Middle East today. A new chance for peace, says the US, with compromise the key. There's been little compromise since President Carter brokered the Camp David agreement between Israel and Egypt nearly 20 years ago. George Bush says he may become personally involved in talks, as President Carter did. But as one official put it, there's a great deal to be achieved before then. Bill Neely, News at 10, Washington.
The President of the European Commission, Mr. Jacques Delors, said in London tonight that the European community had to adopt a common foreign and defence policy and a single currency if it was to become a true community. He said it was an ambitious project which couldn't be achieved if the EC was seen as nothing more than a single market backed by a few common policies. Our political editor says government sources have rejected the Delors statement as not having much attraction.
Jacques Delors began his day in London with the Chancellor. Despite the courtesies, the British government and the Commission President are still at loggerheads on the question of a single currency. Britain will support a common currency, the hard AQ, if member states want to use it alongside their own. But as Mr. Delors made clear in his speech tonight, that kind of let's see if it'll all work approach is far from what he wants for Europe.
Our vision of tomorrow's communauté calls for a single currency as a sign of its ability to act as the object of instrument of our ambition. Political union is in a similar situation.
On political union, as Mr. Delors later acknowledged over dinner at number 10, there had been cooperation during the Gulf War.
But this is not enough, which is why the European Council agreed to one of the main objectives of the revision of the treaty is a gradual implementation of a common foreign and security policy.
But all that's being discussed at the 2 big European conferences agreed in Rome last December.
Europe must want to be European, Mr. Delors said tonight, but government sources and Tory backbenchers say he's not exactly helping that process.
What Jacques Delors has done is given a vision of the future with no guide to how we might get there. The British government's approach of practical and positive steps is therefore a much more constructive contribution to the debate.
Mr. Delors also argued in his speech that the Gulf War had shown that Europe needed a common defence and foreign policy. The British government argues that with such a policy, decisive action by the British would have been impossible. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Westminster.
10 children taken into council care last year in the so-called Satanic child abuse case in Rochdale, Greater Manchester, are being returned to their families. The judge ruled that 4 others should stay in care. He said allegations that the children had been involved in satanic or ritual abuse remain unproved. The judge, Mr. Justice Douglas Brown, said social workers had acted in the best interests of the children as they saw them, but they'd made mistakes, he said, and had largely ignored the recommendations of the Cleveland inquiry.
Mr. Justice Douglas Brown's judgment is the most damning indictment of social work practice since the Cleveland inquiry. In freeing the 10 children, he effectively dismissed all the evidence that they'd been victims of ritual abuse. It was the word of a 6-year-old boy from an estate in Rochdale which first alerted social workers. A teacher had said he was acting strangely and talking of ghosts. He and other children were then interviewed and 20 were taken into care. Today, the judge roundly criticised Rochdale Social Services for the methods used to investigate abuse. He said they'd failed to make proper video recordings, failed to consult psychologists, and one social worker hadn't even read the Cleveland report. The judge concluded they were so obsessed with their own belief of what the children were saying that they resolved to remove these children without any independent appraisal. On the subject of ritual abuse, Mr. Justice Douglas Brown said he believed it was unlikely that the children had been given drugs. He said that when they described flying or killing babies, it was obvious that they were not describing real events. Not only was it highly improbable, he said, but the police had found no evidence of bodies. Instead, the judge suggested that the children had been allowed to watch unsuitable and frightening films at home. After the hearing, a solicitor acting for the family said they'd been vindicated.
It's not what it says about Rochdale Social Services, it's what it says about anybody that's involved in childcare cases such as this. They have got to be aware of the Cleveland guidelines and they've got to adhere by them and they've got to follow those guidelines.
Later, one of the families spoke of their relief at the judgment.
Brilliant. She's brilliant. And I thank the judge.
What's the first thing you'll do you think, when you see the children come through the door tomorrow?
Hug them and kiss them and tell them how much I love them and miss them.
To prevent the mistakes of Rochdale happening again, the judge recommends there should be proper and intensive training of social workers. They must seek expert advice in cases of satanic abuse. All interviews should be videotaped, and children should be removed from home only after school hours.
The last memory the child may have had of seeing their parents can so often make what was an unhappy and a difficult situation really very much harder to recover from.
Tonight, officials at Rochdale Council met privately to discuss the judgment. They stressed that while their methods were criticised, the motives of individual social workers were not.
We have been given a report of the judge's statement, and we're considering the implications of it, particularly what the judge had to say were the 6 lessons to be learnt from this important case.
The Director of Social Services is expected to give his response in person tomorrow. Libby Wiener, News at 10, Rochdale.
The Italians began to take a tough line today on the sheer size of the number of Albanians seeking refuge in Italy. The flight of the thousands escaping repression, a report next. Plus, cruelty to animals increases. The RSPCA blames viciousness. And what Iraqi looters missed, thanks to the timing of the ground war. That's in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, and have a look at this tech thing. It's bigger than we thought.
What is it?
Well, I don't know, but it's coming through now.
They're all over the country and the top businessmen.
Apparently, the government's well involved.
Who are they, anyway?
That's the chief executive of Rolls-Royce Motor Cars. And this one's a university vice-chancellor.
Who's he?
He's the Eurotunnel fella. Oh, what's the connection?
Look at this blow-up.
TEC. But what does it mean?
Comet are offering interest-free credit on all Hoover products over £100. You'll be surprised what you can pick up. You know where to come.
Indicators? Okay.
What do you think of it, then?
It's lovely.
It's got electric windows.
Do they work? Hurry.
That's all right, it's all right.
Hurry.
When you buy a used car from Network Q, you'll be saying thank you, because at Network Q, every used car gets 114 separate checks, just like a new car.
Any problems, just give us a ring.
Thank you.
Network Q, used cars like new.
Who can help me reduce my production costs?
Business services can.
Who can help me make more money?
Business services can.
Who can make my paint finish go from strength to strength?
Business services can.
Who can help us offer our customers a better environment?
Business services can.
Who can help large and small businesses to increase profitability?
The business services of East Midlands Electricity. Phone 0800 100 111 now to find out how business services can help your business.
Governor, stick it on the back page, okay?
Frank, I've cracked it.
First week, first scoop, eh, Julie?
This network is everywhere. Top employers, education lists.
And the government?
Tech, it's a code name.
For training and enterprise councils.
Training and enterprise council?
Yeah, they're local. They help companies of all sizes with their training and business needs.
But how?
First rule of journalism, read the papers, eh, Julie?
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Colourvision will give you this 14-inch colour portable TV absolutely free when you buy this 51cm Fastex remote control Philips TV for only £379. Plus this Decacolour LCD remote control video for only £269. All three for only £648 or just $15.99 a month. APR 32.1.
See local press for details.
Italy says 12,000 Albanian refugees packed onto ships off the Italian coast will be sent back. The Albanians have taken their lives in their hands to escape poverty and communist repression at home. Albania sealed off its main port Durrës and made it a military zone to stop people leaving. Sue Lloyd-Roberts at ITN reports.
Machine gun fire over the Albanian port of Durrës as security forces tried to stop people entering the harbour. They were trying to force their way onto foreign ships to escape from what they see as the poorest and most repressive regime in Europe. Spokesmen from foreign embassies in Tirana have asked people not to flee to neighbouring countries, but still they come, prepared to wait for days on the shore if necessary. One desperate group boarded a ship without its crew and crashed into the harbour wall. Those that make it, up to 2,000 on one ship, have been kept up to 2 days at sea by the Italian authorities. With no food or water on board, some are so weak they have to be carried off. About 12,000 refugees are now at the port of Brindisi. The Italians say all of them are to be sent back, except those being allowed into hospitals in the town. Some were crushed and injured in the rush to get on shore. Extra police were brought to the port as scuffles broke out between hungry Albanians and relief workers handing out food. A month ago in the Albanian capital, Tirana, demonstrators tore down the statue of Enver Hoxha, the architect of Albania's Stalinist-type communist state. The present government has promised reform and free elections, but the mad rush to leave over the last few days suggests that young Albanians are not prepared to wait.
Here, deliberate cruelty to animals rose by almost 2/3 last year, the RSPCA said today. That includes beatings, shootings and baiting. Dogs suffer most. Convictions for cruelty and neglect rose by almost 1/3. The RSPCA is taking on extra staff to cope. Their campaign's director said the figures reflected a general increase in the viciousness in society.
Acting on a tip-off, a team of dog wardens and RSPCA inspectors move in to rescue 2 abandoned Alsatians. The dogs are in a desperate state. Locked in a soiled backyard for the past week, every precaution has to be taken. One of the Alsatians was unable to walk, bleeding internally. It was already near to death.
Unfortunately, I saw one was really ill, and the other one was just totally unreformable. So there's nothing else to do but to destroy the dog. It was the sad part of the job.
Just two more statistics to add to the shocking list of cruelty published by the RSPCA today, which shows convictions for cruelty up by nearly a third, with dogs bearing the brunt of the suffering. The charity also received more than 1 million phone calls for assistance, well up on last year's figures.
No, you're right. It's completely anonymous. We have a strict rule that the person that you've complained about never finds your name out.
In a desperate attempt to cope, the RSPCA plans to boost the numbers of its inspectors on the ground. But fighting cruelty doesn't come cheaply. It will cost another £1.5 million. David Chater, News at 10, with the RSPCA in Manchester.
The polls have just closed in the Ribble Valley by-election in Lancashire. Voters have been choosing a new MP after the elevation to the Lords of the former Home Secretary, Mr. David Waddington. The Conservatives are defending a majority of 19,500 with their main challengers, the Liberal Democrats. Our political correspondent, Mark Webster, is at the count. Mark, any signs so far of which way the vote is going?
Well, as you should be able to see behind me, the first ballot boxes have now arrived and the counting has started. What's not in doubt is that they probably contain some pretty grim news for the Tories. This is an election which has been fought on one issue and one issue only, the poll tax. And although it's too early to say that the Tories could have lost this seat, I think it does speak volumes for the unpopularity, the continuing unpopularity of the poll tax, that what was once one of the safest Tory seats in the country is now tonight too close to call.
Well, how did the parties go about getting out the voters in the last-minute rush?
All the parties had an enormous number of workers brought in from outside. There were a lot of speakers out on the streets to try and drum up some support. I think at the heart of it was the conviction by both the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party to try and persuade supporters on either side that with tactical voting, they were the party that could beat the Tories. Now, at the moment, the Liberal Democrats seem to be ahead and in second place, but Labour is also saying that it's improved very substantially on its share of the vote from the general election.
Mark Webster, thanks very much for that.
The MP, seen most often on the televised proceedings of the House of Commons, says he's standing down at the next election. Mr. Bernard Wetherell, Speaker of the House for the last 8 years, has also been the Conservative MP for Croydon North East for the last 27. The contest for his successor has already begun.
Bernard Wetherell has been Speaker for over 7 years. He was 70 last November and feels it's time to go. He makes no secret that sometimes the job has been a burden.
Oh, God!
There are rough times and smoother times, but on balance, I know that I was chosen by all the members of the House of Commons, and therefore they would support me.
The arrival of television has been the high point, he says. It's helped to explain what all the noise is about.
We sit in the chapel of St. Stephen's, in the choir stalls, very close to each other. It has created a cockpit atmosphere, and as you know, woven into the carpets in front of the Speaker's chair are those two broad red lines, which are exactly 2 sword lengths plus 1 foot apart, and a daily reminder to us that our duty is to settle our disputes by the word rather than by the sword.
At present, the favourites to succeed him are the Conservative MP, Dame Janet Fuchs, and Labour MP, Betty Boothroyd, one of his deputies. Either would be the first woman to hold the office. Speaker Wetherell says whoever succeeds him will need to be impartial, fair and robust, with one extra quality.
I think also the safety valve of a bit of a sense of humour.
And tonight's main news again. Thousands of Kuwaitis have been freed by Iraq tonight. Red Cross officials escorted a convoy of lorries over the border but said they'd not been allowed into the city of Basra. They also had no news of the 21 foreign journalists Iraq had said it would release. And here, 10 children at the centre of the Rochdale ritual abuse case have been returned to their families on the orders of a High Court judge. He criticised the way social workers had handled the case.
Finally, in Kuwait City, a British woman and her son stood guard over their basement throughout the Iraqi occupation, desperate to keep its contents secret. Inside, a unique private collection of Arab treasure, dating back 10 centuries.
This is just a tiny part of the Aladdin's Cave of Kuwait.
a priceless collection of Islamic history that the Iraqi soldiers eventually found but failed to loot. The private Tariq Museum lies in the basement of a family house in the city. Jihan Rajab, a British woman married to a Kuwaiti, struggled for 7 months to keep its treasures from the Iraqis. The collection spans 10 centuries and all the Arab countries. The jewellery alone is worth millions of pounds. Jahan showed us how she and her son Nada spent every day watching anxiously for soldiers. The Iraqis had already looted the university and the National Museum, and she was sure they would find her museum too.
I would have been devastated because you can't repeat these things in so many cases. They were actually destroying their own history, if you like, their own culture as Arab Islamic history, which was shattering.
Finally, in late February, came the moment she and her son had been dreading.
They blocked off the whole road. They had troops down the side of the neighbour's house, a big car with a machine gun on top, and they all looked extremely official.
The soldiers beat Nada into opening the museum. They spent over an hour and a half searching, but the Rajabs conned them into thinking all the gold jewellery was made of brass. The troops even missed this gold necklace stuffed with diamonds and pearls. But the family was convinced the troops would be back the next day to steal the collection. But overnight the ground war started, and the Iraqis had more pressing concerns.
I think we were so lucky. We've been ever so lucky. I'm very grateful.
That's the news so far this evening. Over on Channel 4, later tonight, there's Midnight Special. But from Julia and from me, good night.
Should we celebrate the Gulf victory with a victory parade? And are enough women involved in politics? Central Lobby investigates in just a few minutes.
I want to be a tomato. I want to be in bed. I want to be different.
I want to be expelled.
I want to be able to scratch it.
I want to be home an hour ago.
I want to be a tree.
I want to be safe, not sorry.
I want to be served.
I want to be in Europe.
I want to be loved.
I want to be in conglomerates.
Whatever you want to be in life, you want to be with Prudential.
Holler Eurodollar, and we'll be there. And there, and there. To rent a car, just holler Eurodollar, and we'll be there.
In 5 days, we'll change the way you wash your face forever.
What's wrong with soap and water, I said. OK, I find soap a bit drying, but that's the price you pay for clean skin. I thought.
We asked Sheridan to use Ulay's foaming beauty wash instead of soap for 5 days.
After rinsing, my skin felt smoother, as clean as soap but not at all dry. I wasn't expecting softer skin after just 5 days, but that's what I've got. Fantastic.
Ulay's foaming beauty wash will change the way you wash your face forever.
I'll never let soap near my face again.
Servants, don't you ever feel we've been left behind in the evolution race?
How do you mean?
Well, we've got no fingers, have we? Look at her. She's got fingers.
Say, so she has.
See? We just haven't evolved as quickly.
Speak for yourself, Wilbur. Hello, darling. Only the smart species get Cadbury's fingers.
I have a secret, but I am a little shy, and I can't just tell anyone, so you'll only hear it if you're telepathic. I've lost Horace, my teddy bear. If you see him, please send him home. Thank you for listening.
When it's Sunday lunch and you want a roast, lean on pork, lean on British pork.
There's been so many things that's held us down, but now it looks like things are finally coming around. If you've ever been held down before, I know you refuse to be held down anymore, yeah. And don't you let nothing stand in your way. I want you to listen to every word I say. Ain't no stopping us now. We're on the move, moving.
Britannia, for every move you make.
Good evening. Well, as far as the weather goes, it is more of the same tomorrow. And that's because we've a low pressure once again down to the south of the country, and this low pressure is feeding cloud and rain northwards across the whole of the country. So straight away, let's check out tonight's weather. And apart from a few clear slots over southern and central parts, it's cloud elsewhere with rain, the rain tending to ease off as the night wears on, but not entirely so, because later on another band of rain sweeps across and affects southern parts. Now, there are no temperature problems, but be warned, there might be fog and mist drifting around. So we move on to Friday, and the day gets off to a rather cloudy start, apart from the very far northwest with just a touch of brightness. But look at this rain down south, fair old bucketing down at times. Then as the afternoon wears on, well, that rain gets its act together, travels northwards across most of England and Wales, leaving brighter weather behind for the southern halves of these countries by the end of the afternoon, apart from the southwestern corner, where this pretty grim stuff does tend to hang on. Temperatures, once again on the mild side, between 10 and a high of around about 14 or 15, but rather chilly on the eastern side of the country because those easterly winds are just not giving up yet. That's all from me. Good night.
Good evening. The latest news from Central in the East Midlands. Police are hunting a man who tried to abduct a 2-year-old boy in a busy shopping centre. The boy was unharmed after his mother gave chase, but the police say it could have been a very serious crime.
The boy was waiting outside this butcher's shop in Loughborough when a man offered him a sweet and walked off with him. A passerby told his mother, who caught up with the man in a nearby alley. The boy wasn't harmed, but the police are worried the man may try again.
We are concerned about him. We are treating it as a serious case of attempted abduction.
Police say the family is too distressed to be identified, but today they brought the toddler's Mac to the shopping centre to try to jog the memories of any potential witnesses.
Tornado pilot prisoners of war have landed in Germany en route to their homes in the East Midlands. But among the first of troops to be reunited with their families is a soldier who suffered serious burns in the battle for Kuwait and his 2 brothers. The incident at the start of the ground war almost cost 28-year-old Terry York his life. Now safely back home with his family, he's trying to put aside the memories of a shell exploding on his vehicle and being engulfed in a white heat.
The vehicle exploded into flames inside. I felt myself burning, and I knew how to get out, and I got out. And the crew were also in it, and they got hurt as well, but everybody got out safely.
Did you realise how badly hurt you were?
Well, when I jumped out, I rolled around on the floor for a bit, putting out flames, and I looked at my hands. I saw my hands were burnt, and I could feel my face was burnt, and one of my legs was on fire.
His life was only saved by his NBC suit. First, he was airlifted to a field hospital before being taken to other hospitals in Riyadh and then Woolwich, before eventually being allowed home. His brothers, Derek and Alan, who are both Royal Engineers, have been allowed home from the Gulf on compassionate leave to see him. For his mother, Lorraine, the worry of having 3 sons at war is over. After Terry's accident, she hardly dared dream that they'd all be together again. Now she has only one word to describe them.
Oh, they're heroes. They're great. So, I mean, I know Terry got wounded, but, you know, it's fantastic having them home. They're just great.
It's likely to be several months before the physical scars are healed. The emotional repairs may take even longer. His brothers may have to return to the Gulf, but for Terry York, being back with his wife and 18-month-old daughter Amanda can only help speed his recovery. A man has appeared in court on drugs charges in Thailand. Stephen Harris, who's 33 and from Hucknall in Nottinghamshire, is charged with possessing £250,000 worth of heroin. He has asked for a further 5 offences to be considered. Under Thai law, he could face life imprisonment or the death sentence. The case was adjourned until April the 17th. A man has walked away with tens of thousands of pounds after robbing a bank. He told a cashier he had a gun.
£40,000 was stolen from this branch of the Midland Bank on Lincoln Road at Millfield in Peterborough shortly after the end of the morning rush hour, where, according to the police, he calmly handed a note to the cashier saying he had a gun. The robber, who's described as being a white male in his early 20s, around 5 feet 8 inches tall, and was wearing a lime green tracksuit top, escaped with the cash in a plastic bag. Police want the help of a customer who was in the bank at the time.
There was one customer who was immediately in the bank immediately before the offence took place, and 2 other people who we have traced who came in afterwards. Obviously the person we need to speak to is the person who was in there at the time the offence took place.
Police say they don't believe the man had a weapon, roadblocks were set up, and bank staff have been interviewed throughout the day.
2 cygnets protected from birth by a local community have been shot dead by vandals. One swan had 6 air rifle pellets fired into its head.
These were the cygnets that captured the imagination of a community. Their parents built a nest within yards of a public footpath, so last year locals from Elston near Leicester set up a swan watch to protect the eggs and the young ones when they hatched. But all their efforts were in vain. Now the nest is deserted and the parents swim alone.
One cygnet had 6 airgun pellets in its head. The other had 1 pellet, but it had obviously been shot several times.
Local landlord Ivan Ball helped organise the swan watch.
Looked after them for 12 months and they've left the nest virtually now, and parents had sent them away. And now it's just like losing somebody, your family, really. It's terrible news, really.
The police have been informed. Swan Watch members have been asking people if they've seen anything suspicious, but there have been no results so far. And all they can hope is that the surviving swans don't suffer the same fate.
A multi-million-pound scheme to develop a picturesque riverside park into a housing and leisure complex has been criticised by residents and businessmen. Councillors have been told it could spoil the tourist town of Matlock in Derbyshire. Developers want to build on 6 acres of land alongside the River Derwent. It would mean the closure of the Mining Museum and the Pavilion Club. Councillors say the views of local people will be considered before a final decision is made. And that's the latest news. Lisa's back with the next update at 5 to 10 tomorrow morning. But from all of us here tonight, good night.
Is out and galoshes on for this lot. We've got some more mist and fog patches forming tonight, particularly around the lowland and valleys. With more rain on the way later, heavier bursts of rain for the Peak District. Temperatures only down to 6 Celsius tonight. That's 43. It's going to be a bit of a miserable journey into work tomorrow, or any time of the day really, with rain falling, spray on the road, so be ready for that, because that rain will continue through the morning with some heavy falls, and little change for the afternoon with rain and more rain through the day. Just the chance of some brighter weather poking into the south of the region late in the afternoon. Temperatures about right for March. We've got 11 Celsius, 52 Fahrenheit.
Friday on Central, the trials of Rosie O'Neill.
I eat chocolate chip cookies for lunch, and I smoke cigarettes, too many of them. And I'm sleeping with a 25-year-old carpenter.
That's what comes from eating cookies and smoking.
What are we doing here?
What if he falls in love with you?
He's not going to fall in love with me. Why is it all right for a man in his 40s to go out with a girl in her 20s, whereas I feel like Mrs. Robinson?
Let's hear it for the trials of Rosie O'Neill, Friday on Central.
With so many compact washing powders around, you may be a little unsure about which to choose. However, some people made up their minds ages ago. Experts like Hoover, Indesit, Service, AEG, and many more recommend Ariel Ultra, because they know nothing cleans better. Ariel Ultra, Most cleaning experts are queuing up to recommend it.
Stale smells up here often come from down there in your carpet. Smells from your dog and tobacco too. Well, Shake and Vac from Glade is here. Do the shake and vac and put the freshness back. Do the shake and vac and put the freshness back. Do the shake and vac and put the freshness back. Shake and Vac in 4 fragrances.
Swidler, 2 years free servicing and a 3 years parts and labour warranty. Fiat start from only £9.86 a week at Swidler Motors, 180 Catherine Street and 47 Blackbird Road, Leicester.
On Central, the show that demonstrates how to achieve the apparently impossible. The secret is to give it a go, and the sky's the limit for the brave who take up the challenge. It's a bit of a gamble, but it's all for charity. Matthew Kelly is the host of Saturday Night's You Bet on Central.
Saturday nights on Central, watch Aspel Company, in which Michael proves that the art of conversation is far from dead. Just watch the way he meets the challenge of meeting the famous, the apprehension and the tension, the drama and suspense.
Rod Stewart as Michael Aspel's Special Company, Saturday at 9:45. But now, it's Central Lobby.
On Central Lobby tonight, is this the sort of tribute the Gulf War troops deserve, or would it be obscene? And on the eve of International Women's Day, the MP who could make political history.
Good evening. Also tonight we'll be assessing the situation at the Ribble Valley by-election, John Major's first electoral test as Prime Minister.